have a sphere of influence in the city of San Diego, whether it's with your families or with your friends, your coworkers, whoever it might be. And so each third Friday, our topic is going to be focused on equipping you to live out your calling. And so tonight, we're talking about love, sex, and dating. That pertains to relationships, because healthy relationships leads to a healthy life and even greater kingdom impact. And the reverse is true too. If we don't have healthy relationships, that oftentimes erodes a lot of our impact in the kingdom of God and in ourselves. So that's a little bit of the heart behind tonight. And I just want to give our panelists a big round of applause for being here. They all have probably many other cool places they could be on a Friday night. So we're so thankful that you're here. With that, to kick it off, I'm going to have you guys each just introduce yourself. Obviously, please tell us your name, and then tell us how old you were when you guys met as a couple, how long you've been married, and if you have any kids. And I'll remind you if you miss anything.
I'm Jason, this is my wife, Leal. We met, was I 25? I was 23. 24. And she'll share how old she was. 21, something like that. Yeah, we've been married for almost 6 years. What were the other questions?
How many kids?
No kids. No kids.
Awesome.
So yeah, this is Leal. I was 20 when we met. We're 3 years apart. That's why I miscalculated his, but yes. And yeah, no kids.
Teresa Robbins, and I was 19 when I met Mark, the old guy, and we have been married over 40 years. We have 3 sons that are somewhere in this age group, 36, 34, and 30. All of them are married. So,
I'm Mark. I met Teresa when I was 28. She was 19. A little bit of an age thing, but yeah, we've been married 4 years, and 3 kids and 6 grandkids. So
Exciting.
Oh, what else?
No, it's great.
I have your.
We do have our own element. Okay. I'm Kendall Reyes. I met Jacob when I was 13. We've known you. We were in 8th grade. We've known each other for 10 years. We've been married a year and a half. No kids.
Awesome.
And I'm Jacob.
Awesome. And so tonight we're gonna start kind of big picture, then we're gonna get into the nitty details, and then I'm gonna bring us back on out. And anybody's welcome to chime in on the panel. It's family style. We do have a bit of a time crunch. There's so much we could cover, so we may just limit to 1 or 2 responses on some questions. But some of the panels will be hanging out afterwards, and so there's also more opportunity to just talk and connect with them there. But I want to open it up to whoever wants to take this one. Is why even talk about relationships and marriage in the church? Does God really care about marriage? Mark's got it.
Does God care about marriage? Yes, I think marriage is one of the relationships that's most like what God wants with us. And in the New Testament, it says that our relationship with Christ, we're the bride as the church, and He's the husband, He's the head of the church. And so the marriage relationship it teaches us a lot about what kind of relationship God wants to have with us. And besides that, I think it's relation with men especially. It helps men not to be so crazy and wild, to have a wife to help calm them down. I need a lot calming down sometimes.
And like in line with what you said earlier, Peter, like it is the foundation of everything, and the person that you end up marrying will be used by God as someone who would bring healing into your life. but also marriage brings up a lot in your heart because you've never lived in that close proximity and intimacy emotionally and spiritually and even physically with someone. And it's just so important. It's so important because how you deal with the things that come up in marriage can make or break your marriage.
I'll also add just real quick, it's sort of related to a future question, but marriage and relationships and dating is not talked about a lot in church, and Christianity kind of tends to make everything super spiritualized and dating super spiritualized and takes it way too seriously in the church. So it's good to just talk about it so we have practical direction and realistic expectations.
Yeah. So let me add a follow-up. On the one hand, we're hearing, yes, marriage is foundational, it reflects God's love for us, it's pivotal. On the other hand, we're also hearing some things like, okay, the church can be over-spiritualized. So I'll just ask kind of a simple question of, does it matter who I marry? Can I just fall in love with anybody? What's the big deal?
I think something that I've always heard growing up is who you marry is the second most important decision of your life. The first one being to follow Jesus, but the second one is who you're going to marry. And it's just like everyone's already mentioned, but it is your closest relationship outside of God. And it is what teaches you how God loves you and how God desires you. And outside of being married to Kendall, I've never really understood that, how God actually felt about me, until I actually saw her walk down the aisle, and I knew this is how God feels about me. He wants to see me on the day when I get to heaven, and he's going to be like, that's my son, that's my bride. I'm so excited to finally be with him or her the way that it was supposed to be.
Right.
So that's why I would say it's pretty important.
Just curious, how many people here grew up in a Christian home and in church? So a fair number, and a fair number you haven't. So just to let you know a little background on me, I grew up in a Christian home, was married a girl in my church, and divorced. And at that point, I rejected Christianity completely and went out into the world. So I lived in the world doing what I wanted to do, and that's where we met. So God has a lot of grace for us that don't do everything right, okay? There's a lot of grace that God has for people, and he loves people no matter where we're coming from. So even if we don't do things perfectly, God still has a plan for you. And when you come to him open and willing, he won't reject you. So I want to say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to pull on that thread too, kind of as we travel down this journey here. But yeah, it sounds like it does matter who we marry. So what are some of the things we should be looking for as men and women who want to follow God in a spouse? There's the obvious, but maybe the less obvious as well. And then especially, it seems like roughly half the group in here grew up in church as well. So maybe what are the things that the church doesn't emphasize that are actually really important in marriage? And then, what should we look for? Think about that as we do that. I'm going to do a quick poll just to see where our audience is at. If you're married, raise your hand. Got a couple marrieds, all right. If you are engaged, let's see some hands, okay. Woo! All right, a couple engaged couples. And if you are dating, let's raise our hands. All right, couple dating couples. I'm in that category too. And then where are my singles at? Wow. All right, so it's a fairly, maybe got some balanced group here. Okay. So with that, what are some things, if you are single in the audience, that you should be looking for in a spouse?
I would like to mention the scripture in Proverbs 31. I guess this relates more to men, but it applies to both genders. What is it? It's charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. I would say the number one thing that you should look for is a heart that's surrendered to God and wants to obey no matter the cost. That, trust me, it's much more valuable than outward beauty. That's the foundation of your marriage, is You want to look for someone who's truly a disciple, and you've observed that and not just heard them say it, but you've actually seen it lived out.
I was going to say that Mark and I might not have started off correctly. I just want to keep that thought. Sometimes when you get older, you have this great thought and then it leaves you. But I do remember meeting Mark and looking for someone that had a strong faith, and he didn't. He was in a period where he had his back turned against God, and I thought, this is a great guy who was pursuing me, but I actually thought this isn't going to work, because even though I grew up Catholic, we grew up in a very charismatic Catholic church, so Jesus was very important to me, even though I didn't know what it was to walk with the Lord. But anyways, with that, I thought, this is going to be the deal breaker, is this guy is so mad at God, like, I don't know if we can continue dating. But then down the road, there was more to the story, etc.
I would also say just building a friendship. I think friendship is such a foundational part of marriage. Like, you go home to this person every day, you are going to share your ups and share your downs. So if you're missing that foundational piece of friendship, it's going to be hard to make it through like the more difficult conversations, I would say.
I'd also add, just look for someone who's running the same race as you. It doesn't stop when you get married. God expects you to continue doing what He called you to do. And so if you, while you're dating, are looking for that and you're kind of filtering out, okay, maybe this person isn't doing what I want to be doing, or maybe they're not called to the same things I'm called to, it helps a lot shape your perspective. And, for me and Kendall, like, we were called into ministry at a younger age, and so it's hard to do that if she's not willing to run the same race that I'm running. So that'd be what I would say.
Yeah, awesome thoughts. All right, so take us on a little journey here. So you're single in the audience. You're hearing these things that you want to find in the spouse, right? Friends, serving the Lord, wholehearted. So you find that person. What do? If you're a guy, how do you initiate? If you're a girl, can you initiate? Take us into that. Do you use the pickup lines we heard earlier?
No, please do not. I would say, don't take it so seriously. Like, I guess I'm talking more to the guys, because they're supposed to be the ones initiating. Just hang out. Like, the friendship piece is where you should start. Like, just start hanging out. If you're interested in someone, say, hey, I'm interested in getting to know you more. I want to potentially date you. Let's hang out more often and see how it goes. And just like go on a hike, or yeah, just like hang out. It doesn't have to be the super spiritual thing where like your first thing is like this romantic date or like this huge, nice, expensive dinner. Just like, yeah, be relaxed, but also make sure to communicate clearly what your intentions are up front.
I just want to add to that. I think what helped me when Jason pursued me is that he did not take things too seriously. He took me seriously, but he had very clear expectations and like very clear, clearly where he wanted to take this if things were to work out. And I think that for me helped me respond with like a yes or no. And I think sometimes for women, maybe that's not everyone, but we feel like, oh, we don't want to reject that person, or we want to give it a shot, but like don't drag the guy along if you don't think it's gonna work. Be clear. Like, clarity is key. Like, clear communication, starting from the get-go, is just the most important thing. So yeah, I'll just stop here and leave room for others.
We had a hilarious beginning with this.
Please share.
We broke up 5 times before we actually got engaged because of, I'm thinking this guy doesn't like God. And then he actually met me and just said, I just want to have fun, don't want to get serious. 1 month later, he says, I have to tell you something, I'm in love with you. And I went, cool. I didn't say I love you back. and I actually moved to Hawaii. So it really was, yeah, it was kind of funny and bumpy. But anyways, it was really about, this guy isn't the one because he doesn't even have a faith. Not, again, I was not walking with the Lord like a lot of you might have been, but I just knew there's really no future here because he doesn't have a belief, a faith in God. He was angry at God.
Yeah. Just to
So how
continue
do
the
you- how-
story.
yeah, how do you follow that up?
Yeah, so we did get back together. I went to Hawaii, kind of wooed her back, came back to the U.S.
How do you
And,
move it?
and promptly with that first weekend, I was out of control. I got into a fight in a club, and she just went, "This guy's crazy, I'm out." And she left, and I was like, "Oh, what? She left me? Oh, well, okay, fine." And I thought it was over. 2 weeks later, I'm in Maryland, and it was a sales course, and the sales trainer, there was 2 weeks, end of the first week, and that Friday, the sales trainer put a box of books on the table. He said, "Grab a book and go out for the weekend and read the book and bring back an oral report." So I grabbed a book, went out for the weekend, went out clubbing, during the weekend, came back to the hotel room, and there's this book sitting on my nightstand. I went, "Oh no, I'm gonna read this book." So I thought I'd just skim through it. And it was called The Greatest Miracle in the World. And God used that book, opened my eyes to his love for the first time. I mean, I'd never heard about God's love before. Growing up in a church, I never heard and felt that kind of love before. In spite of everything that I had done and treated people, it changed me, it transformed me. And overnight, and I came back from that course and called her up and said, "I just want to apologize to you." So I met her for lunch and just said, "I'm so sorry for the way I treated you. Can we just be friends?" And that's how our relationship started. Anyway, that's how the story started.
Any other thoughts? That's wonderful. All right, so say she says yes to the date, it's going well. What are some things to keep in mind to actually date well as followers of Jesus? And then we'll go deeper on maybe some of those.
I think one thing that comes to mind is don't put a ton of pressure on yourself thinking this has to be my spouse, right? Like in the first date. Like I feel like a lot of the Christian scene right now that I see, like you guys have probably heard the term like ring by spring. It's a joke we tell in college ministry. But there's that like that mentality like I gotta date this person, I gotta know in the first date if I'm gonna marry them. And I just feel like you do yourself a disservice by having that mentality. So just you can get to know the person, be friends with them, like, go places where, you're not gonna be put into temptation easily, like, and just like get to know what they're like make them laugh, get to know what their family history is like and see like, is this person checking the boxes that I have, or is this maybe something that like I should be clear now, hey, maybe we should just continue to be friends and get to know each other, so.
I also think like the more serious you get, the more communication you need. So if you're seriously getting into a relationship, then you need to have those conversations about boundaries, which is very important, no matter if you don't think it's not. We have that conversation quite a few times. But I think the more serious you get in that relationship, the clearer boundaries and communication you have to set with each other, emotionally and physically. It's not just the physical side.
One of the things that I have 3 boys, and they all kind of took different paths to marriage, but I always told them as they were in that dating age that their job as a man is to protect the woman and protect her honor. And so if you're dating men, if you're dating a woman, don't ever assume that you're going to be together forever. You want to protect her for the man who is going to marry her. So you look after her soul and protect her and honor her that way.
That's good.
And I think one way you can do that is by or one way you can lead well. I guess let's say you're in, you've gone on a couple of dates, like what Peter was saying, and you feel like you're gaining traction. Well, I guess first I would want to say to your point earlier, it's okay if you guys aren't connecting to like just be like, I don't think this person is for me. Like you don't have to be like, we're not connecting, but I'm just gonna wait it out or whatever. Like I don't think I've really, like rare is the marriage that has started off with people not being able to just hang out and like talk and like gain traction in a relationship. I think everybody knows what that feels like. You just kind of feel comfortable around them, and as time goes on, you get more and more comfortable.
The flow.
The flow. So once you have that, like let's say hypothetically you have that flow, what you would want to do as a man to practically actually protect her heart is say like kind of have transition markers where you like sort of cast vision for what the relationship is, like its purpose and how it's going to look, and have it in progressive stages that lead up to marriage. So for example, like with her, we were dating long distance at first, so I limited our times to like an hour max for like 3 months or two, I don't know how long. And then I said, and then we just kept on going a little bit longer. Then I was like, you know what? We've been gaining traction. We're in the flow. I want to spend more time on these calls with you, and I would just say up front, I am getting more interested in you. This is where I see our relationship right now, and this is where it's going, because that tells the woman that I'm thinking about you, I'm thinking about your heart, because I think, I don't know, this could open up discussion for, it's off topic, but maybe some of the women could speak to this. It's like, how does it make, when a man does that, why is that helpful or significant for you?
So just to be real here, I did not come from a Christian background, and I had some very toxic relationships before dating Jason. So I was his first girlfriend, and he was not my first boyfriend. In those toxic relationships, I didn't have a man who cast vision. I was asking for vision. I was pushing back, asking for boundaries. And so when Jason was consistently casting vision, like I never felt confused about where we were at. And I never felt unprotected and uncovered. Like I never felt like, oh, I need to watch out and see if Jason is gonna like maintain boundaries sexually and physically, I was not worried about that because he always like set those boundaries, and it was even a healing agent for me. Like it was like something I've never experienced before. I also come from like a divorced family, so like that's also not something I've experienced growing up. And so that's also another part of honor. Like if the other men that I dated actually honored those things, I probably would not have walked into this relationship with as much pain as I carried. But then the man doing that, has kept me in a place of safety and peace, and this lack of anxiety of like, what's next?
I'm gonna ask a follow-up to that. We've got a lot of different personalities in the crowd too. And for some people, so what I'm hearing is clarity is really important, and you really appreciate that, Lyle. For some people, at least is what I've observed, too much clarity can take the fun out of dating and disrupt the flow. But you also need to have the flow and not be like overly intentional, and you're not like sending an email every week, hey, this is our status report, So if somebody give us some guidelines, like how much intentionality do you want so you're not like this hyper intentional, sorry, I'm gonna bag on the homeschoolers, like the homeschool Christian, just like, here we are, I was homeschooled, so I'm bagging on myself. But do you guys know what I mean? Kind of like a little bit too much, where it's very rigid almost.
Yeah, never tell a girl that you think God told you that she's gonna be your wife. Please don't do that. Even if he told you, don't do that. And I think part that we took as a given, but we didn't mention, is like, not like Jason is coming to me and he's like, this is our vision, this is where we're going. Like, he's saying where he's at and he's asking me where I'm at. And we're having that continuous open conversation. And it's just so important to be open and, you know, even like, how does your culture play into it, which I know we might touch on later, but like, for me, in my culture, you talk about engagement before you talk about marriage. You don't even really jump to that. And so like, even just establishing and like in family upbringing, like what are you really expecting, and just keeping that open conversation has been very important. But like, not every 2 months, but if your significant other is confused, then you're not doing it enough. Like, I don't know, there isn't an outline, there isn't like timestamps, but.
That's a good word though. If you're confused, you're probably not doing it enough.
A couple of months is a good general thing, because that's where I was.
It's good. All right, I'm gonna move us along a little bit here. We talked a little bit about boundaries. Curious for, you guys all, how did you come up with the boundaries you had? Assuming you had them. Yeah, you, Mark.
Don't give him the mic.
Well, he'll get it.
We can start. Boundaries is something, because we started dating really young, boundaries is something people didn't talk to us enough about. We grew up in Christian families, but we weren't taught, like our church didn't talk about how to date. They didn't talk about like, hey, you shouldn't be doing these things. So the only boundary we knew was like, don't have sex, right? And because that was the line, we're like, okay, this is the line, but like, you know, maybe like, what does it feel like to get close to the line? And that just led us into like feeling shameful and feeling just really, you know, guilty all the time. And so we really didn't figure out our boundaries well until like we got mentorship. So we found a couple that like was allowed to speak into our lives, and they helped us come up with boundaries, and they kept us accountable to sticking to boundaries. And that's when we kind of realized like, oh, this is why we need this. We didn't know we needed it. And so it can like be hard to do, because who wants to have boundaries? But the reality is true love has boundaries. And we see that in the Bible. We see that with like, you know, even in the garden, like God gave Adam and Eve a boundary that they weren't supposed to cross. And so if you truly are loving this person you're dating, you have to at some point sit down with them and say, hey, this is what we need to stay away from, and this is our plan to get away from, you know, the danger zone. And these are the people, you know, maybe it's a couple, or maybe it's just like a close friend, maybe it's like you know, someone that you trust in your life group, but you have a plan. That's really what it comes down to.
I think just to add on, practically speaking, what helped us was literally writing down our boundaries and then going over it with the people we trusted. So for us, it was like, don't hang out after 10 p.m. by yourselves. Like, hang out in a group if you're hanging out late at night, or like trying to put ourselves in the best position to honor one another and to honor the Lord. Because at the end of the day, even though we've known each other since we were 13, who knows like what could have happened? Like, we could have broken up, or things could have happened. But we wanted to do our best to honor one another. And that by having accountability and like practically speaking, like writing down our boundaries.
Sorry, just to add one more thing. What really helps is imagine if your future spouse knew what the two of you were doing. And once I started to think that way, I saw Kendall in a whole different way, and I was like, oh, like if I was gonna be her husband and I knew like she was doing this thing with this guy, I would be really upset. And kind of vice versa, if I knew my like wife was out there doing these things, you know, I would be really upset. And so that's another thing that helps.
I think you said something really important, I think, and that is you got a mentor. You got someone to help you And I think in succeeding in anything in life, anything you really want to do well and succeed well, you need a mentor. And marriage is a great place. When we first got married, we moved to Santa Cruz, and there was a couple there on Young Life staff that just came alongside of us and started mentoring us. Spiritually, emotionally, just in different ways. So it's important to have that in your life.
There still are mentors or our dearest friends, and we speak, we're on the calendar once a month, so we continue to have that friendship 40-some years later.
Everything everyone said is amazing. I just want to add one caveat that might be a little, anyway. Put into question and examination the cultural norms around you, because I feel like in our culture, we have gotten so used to blurring certain lines and being like, oh, this is not that big of a deal, you know, we're not having sex, or oh, we're not making out, but we're, you know, like, it's, we've put a cultural lens, a modernized lens sometimes on boundaries that we really need to examine from a biblical standpoint before rushing into setting boundaries that are like, oh, everyone else is doing it. Yeah.
No, this is fire. I love the mentorship piece. Super important. Inviting people in, accountability. Sometimes it's like a couple just pulls you under, and sometimes you have to seek it out, right? And this is a community. So if you're dating and you feel like you don't have that connection, or you feel like you're kind of isolated, encourage you, get plugged in, join a life group. Like, we'll get you connected and get people to help cover you if you're hungry for it, which I hope you are. Question specific on boundaries. I think it's really relevant to couples dating today, because in this group, a lot of us have jobs. It's great, you know, we're starting to make some money. So what do we like to do? Travel. Did you travel together as a couple exclusively? And sleep in the same bed?
No.
Why not? It's cheaper that way.
It is cheaper that way, but I think everybody already answered that in the previous answer. Yeah, I mean, it gets to the heart of the question, because it's like, for example, if I go too far, like let's say I touch my girlfriend in a place that we agreed not to touch, why? What's the big deal? That would be a question maybe some people could elaborate on, but I think it's important to know like what the purpose of a boundary is and what a boundary is. In this case, we don't touch each other in our private parts, so breasts, like all of that, like we're not going to touch each other. And if you do, what's the problem if you do cross that line? When you do something like that, you're creating a connection that lasts for a really long time and is not going to go away. And like, your name's Jacob, right? Like what he was saying, it's like, if I'm married to somebody and they're telling me and they're gonna have all these memories from like 5 different guys, and now I'm gonna be committed to you my whole life and work together our whole life, that's gonna make it more difficult for me to sexually enjoy you as my wife. The reverse is true, and that's why when a man says, I'm not gonna touch you there, that's respecting not only himself and his future, it's respecting her future.
It's good.
And it's respecting everyone else. And like if you guys end up breaking up and she finds someone else and you find someone else, you protected yourselves and saved yourselves for the right person.
I think really the key thing to think about is like you don't want to give the devil a foothold.
Yeah.
You know, we can say, oh, we've got self-control. Oh, we can do this. Oh, you know, the reality is if you're traveling exclusively, you don't have accountability that's with you in the same place. You're isolated. You're spending so much time together. You're giving the devil a foothold. And why would you want to put yourself in that situation? The question. And why would you want to put the person that you love and care about so deeply in that situation? Doesn't mean you can't do it. Can't control yourself. Like the reality is sexual temptation is something that at a certain point of emotional intimacy is harder and harder to control. And so, yeah, just like avoiding, again, traveling together in its own, like what Jason was saying, like it's not the action, it's the heart behind it. And how are you protecting the person who's with you?
I kind of want to address those. I mean, this is great,
Yeah.
traveling. No, you probably shouldn't be traveling alone together. Opens up so much, but I kind of want to speak. I have this, I don't know. I want to tell those that don't have that scenario, like today is a new day, right? And a line in the sand. Today is a new day. I want to do things differently. Do not live in shame at all. What the history was, what has happened in the past. You know, Mark and I were not pure for marriage, neither one of us. But we run Celebrate Recovery, for those that don't know, with the church. And no, it's not just drugs and alcohol, and I'm not just giving a plug, but we work on not walking in shame, not walking in, you know, it's about working through your habits, hurts, hang-ups. So I kind of want to focus right now that you do not walk in shame with what was. So I just want to, this is great stuff that you're learning up here, but a lot of us, you know, I had to work through a lot of stuff in our marriage, and fortunately I got the greatest guy
Yeah,
to
well,
do
let's
it.
pull on that a little bit more too, because we've got a varied audience, and yeah, it's great to put our best foot forward in dating and relationship engagement, and boundaries are meant to protect what's good, but reality is, like, we've all fallen in certain ways. Many of us have crossed boundaries that we thought we would never ever cross, and some of us did things that we now regret, and we weren't following Jesus, or maybe we were and we still crossed boundaries. Yeah, so maybe just pull that thread a little bit more. I know you spoke already, you don't live in shame, but just what can you guys say to encourage those who have felt guilt or shame? Because you can't just say, oh, don't feel shame. Like, I mean, you can, but you might still feel it. And then what are some steps to help move people out of that if they are feeling shame?
I'll let Mark have the mic.
It's really important for everyone to be honest with themselves first. And if you can be honest with yourself, then, you know, we all have missed the mark, right? We're not perfect. So we make mistakes, and we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to do everything right. I was brought up in a Baptist home, and you know, like, why Baptists are so against premarital sex? Because it might lead to dancing. That's, you know, kind of the ultra boundaries of the Baptist kind of. And, you know, it's like, if you live in that legalistic frame, you're going to beat yourself up most of the time. So we're going to make mistakes, but God has a way for us to get through those. And what we do in Celebrate Recovery to help people is we have a group that we can, men with men, women with women, we share our secrets. We share what's going on in our life, and we're accepted regardless of what we've done, and we're loved no matter what we've done. And what happens to shame when you confess it or share it, it goes away. It's like a silver bullet for shame. When you come out of your kind of denial that I have a problem and really look at the problem, then you share it with somebody, that's the most powerful thing you can do. And if you struggle ongoing with something, that's when you need somebody to call all the time and say, hey, I'm struggling with this right now. I need help right now. And those are the things that are difficult to do because we're so independent, you know, in our culture. But as believers, we weren't called to be independent. We're called to be part of a body, a community, and we need each other. And so I want to put that out there.
Yes, thank you.
And I would just also say, just with what I mentioned earlier, like I did not have a pure dating past before Jason. And so when we were starting to get serious, when we knew we were starting to move towards engagement, like we sat down and I laid things before him Jason doesn't need pictures of what I've done in my past in his head. So you don't need to share every single detail of every single thing. It's just unhelpful for the person that you're with. But come clean and share, and it's not out of, come clean, not out of shame. First of all, come clean with God, and I had to come clean with God and receive God's forgiveness and healing and repent and walk away from that way of life. But I had to come clean to Jason because he needed to know what he's walking into and the baggage and healing that I still had to go through with that. And for the person receiving that news, show grace. Show grace. If that was not Jason's past, I was his first girlfriend, and he showed so much grace and so much care, and even grieved over how other men have treated me. And so if that was not your past, like, just remember to show grace and forgiveness to the other person and really walk in that, and don't pull that card later on. Because we all have something in our past. It's different, but we all have something.
Yeah, I want to add on to that, Lael. I think, like Lael said, like, we've all had something in our past where we're ashamed of. And I'm very much a perfectionist, so it's hard to live my life and make mistakes because I feel such great shame. But I think what the Lord really worked in my heart is there's a difference between shame and conviction. Mm-hmm. So I would be convicted about something we did, but then I would sit in the shame of it. And it's great to feel conviction because you know that the Holy Spirit is like working in you. Amen. And you have that relationship with the Lord to like draw back to, but it's when you take the next step and sit in shame that it's really hard to get out of. So I just think it's important to like acknowledge yourself and how you process things and how you process your mistakes, and realize that conviction is great and it's from the Lord, but you don't have to sit in shame. That is not from the Lord.
Oh, great.
Amen.
I think too, something to just add on is, what comes to mind immediately when you think about shame is Jesus, when he meets the woman at the well, that woman is living in shame. That's why she's going in the afternoon when no one else is there in the heat of day. And what does Jesus make her do? He makes her get real with her situation. And that's been the core of really our marriage, and really what drew us to this church is part of its vision is to get rocked and get real, right? And so that's kind of what Lael was mentioning, is like it takes a moment where you got to get real with, your partner, and you got to get real with, the people who are supporting you, your mentors, and that's the only way you're going to get free of shame, because the enemy wants to keep you in the dark, especially with sexual sin. He loves to keep it in the dark and say, you're the only one who's dealing with this. No one else is messed up like you have. And so you rob yourself of grace, and that's not what God intended for you. And so if that is you tonight, I would encourage you to really just get real with someone you trust about the situation, and that'll be how you start to get free from it.
Excellent, love it. It's true, there is so much freedom. I just want to plug, there's so much freedom in vulnerability, and that happens in life groups, that happens in Celebrate Recovery, it happens in SOT, Get Connected. I won't share too much of my story, but I walk in so much freedom now in sexual purity that I thought I never could walk in. And so if you are struggling with that, I would love to share my story with you at some point as well. I'm sure these folks would as well. But for me, it started in a life group when I made a big mistake, and then I got two of my guy friends, and I said, hey, I need you in my prayer group tonight. And that was really just the beginning where I shared vulnerably. I struggle with vulnerability because it makes me look bad. And as I shared that, I noticed, I felt in my spirit that began to unlock freedom. So we know that sin cannot live in the light. And so as we speak it out and confess it, that is actually bringing light to what we are going through. So I just want to encourage you guys all on that. Okay, and then maybe this one for Mark and Teresa, actually, with Celebrate Recovery. Would love to just kind of hear, you counsel, you see so many different couples. What are, I don't know, maybe just some early warning signs of unhealth that you might see in relationships that people might see either around them or maybe in their own lives and be like, ooh, this seems small, but it can grow. And then likewise, what are some like positive, like healthy steps that like seeds that you see people as they go through this continue to grow and kind of blossom?
Such a loaded question. I feel like
Easy one.
letting Mark go first, but the key when they walk in the door, I think, and what you were just saying, Peter, about it's kind of our life group, right? They walk in the door, the sense of belonging, the sense of they're met by so many faces, they're sat with, whoever it is, male, female, giving the space. We don't really know why they walked in the door, right? Whether a friend took them. There's all ages. By the way, we're the old people, I feel like, right, Mark? So, was that big? I love it. We're the old people. But what I love, so many young people that really need a place to be safe. Confidentiality, anonymity are huge. So, it's like walking in the door, a sense of belonging. More than anything, the community, the getting connected, the feeling like, oh my gosh, this is the place where I can get real about my stuff, whatever my struggle is. And sometimes there's people that are coming in that we have anxiety, there's depression. Those are actually big ones. A lot of people at church, we kind of laugh a little bit that at church people will bring us the homeless person who's, maybe still drunk or whatever. Sure, we're so happy to talk to them and make them feel like they're loved and cared about, but we deal with a lot of issues, childhood trauma, whatever. So we're trying to get them, childhood trauma, abuse, there's just a whole plethora of things, but we want them to feel connected in community. Maybe they don't even know Jesus, but to feel like they've met. We call ourselves Forever Family. We always say, hey, Forever Family, so glad you're here tonight. That's how we refer to everybody. So yeah, we're trying to be family. So I don't know if I answered that, but you go.
Well, I know how many of you grew up in a family. I think everybody did. And I would say probably 100% of families are dysfunctional, okay? I grew up in a Christian home, very dysfunctional. I picked up dysfunctional things in my family.
And his dad was a pastor.
My dad was a pastor. So, we all have issues from growing up in a home because we pick up roles. And there's all kinds of different addictions that are we don't even think of as addictions. Some addictions are relational addiction. Some people cannot go without a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They have to have someone in their life. That's an addiction because they don't feel valued unless they have someone in their life. It can be an addiction to be people pleasing. You want to please everybody, and so you can't say no. You've got to always say yes. It's kind of this codependency. You don't realize what it is, but it's just a way that you've been living. And then when you say no, you feel guilty. Like, oh, I should do that, but so there's all kinds of things like that people come for healing from. Because getting in those patterns, they go and they go and they go until they begin to damage your relationships. And usually you don't find out about those until you get into marriage. You get into marriage and all of a sudden you have these patterns that begin to come out. And in those patterns you find this repetitive, unhealthy way of dealing with things. And that's where you need to find out, well, what is that this pattern keeps happening over and over again. And we call that insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And so when we get into these relationships, you find yourself in a relationship for a while, then you break up. And you find yourself in a relationship for a while, then you break up. And it's kind of this ongoing pattern. And so why is this happening? So stop and then find out what it is that's causing this pattern in my life. And that's what we kind of explore in Celebrate Recovery.
With the 12 steps.
With 12 steps
that are
and principles,
biblically
yeah.
based.
Yeah, get to the root, right?
Get to the root.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And you never stop getting to the root,
Right.
because we have multiple layers, right? We're not just like, I came in for alcoholism, but I've got all kinds of other stuff that I'm dealing with too. Not just, I haven't had a drink in 20 years, but I've got other stuff that I need to deal with in my life.
Well,
Yeah.
there's also, there's pornography for males, but also for females. There's fantasy addiction we see with a lot of females, also with some males. So there's just,
And the root gives birth to many dangerous fruits. And so as we look at something like pornography or fantasy, that's oftentimes like a symptom of something deeper.
Yep.
So I've noticed. And so, yeah, if that's something you are struggling with, like, you can try and try and try, but you're just maybe getting rid of the fruit. You really do need to get to the root. And that truly only Jesus can heal. And we've got communities around us here and in this church that want to help you do that. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's been a great kind of diving deep into that one. Want to bring us kind of a little more forward too as we think about engagement. I've got many couples, myself included, dating here. So how did you guys know you were ready to get engaged? Sounds like nobody knows.
I would say we did, I guess I'll speak for myself. I had a very clear understanding of what I was looking for before dating. I remember one guy, Jason Weatherhead, I think we know him. I think you may know him.
He's watching on the live stream.
Back probably like 2016, 2017 or something, he said he heard some guy challenge him, come up with a list of things and ask God, or write them down and ask God, this is what I want in my wife, in my future wife. And then he, literally every single one happened, and when he met his wife, Hannah. So I said, I'm gonna do that. And I did it, and it happened. So I kind of had that, and then I think, this is my opinion, you don't have to take it, but I think every marriage God needs to like supernaturally, prophetically confirm it in a way that's empirically verifiable instead of just your own thoughts or feelings. So I ask God to confirm it to me supernaturally, because if things get hard, and marriage will get hard, you need God's promise to stand on instead of just like, we just felt like it just seemed like the right thing. And now God can work in so many different ways. I'm sure there's lots of people that have had wonderful marriages without having this signs in the sky. That's just my opinion. That's kind of how I process things.
Can you share what that supernatural thing was?
Well, there weren't it was a series of like kind of subtle confirmations, not really a single one that was like really clear, but one of them was a lot of the very specific things I asked for happening. And there's also, another confirmation of that, for example, is when I finally let go of really wanting a woman. That's immediately when I met her. When I finally was like, I'm all right being single. It took a long time. I met her a month later. So that was like, there's a lot of different things involved, but that's one of them.
So part of our story is, a lot of things happened, but it really all began, when I was younger. I was praying, and to this day, this has been, I think, the most significant answered prayer that God has given me. And I said, God, I really want to date someone who I can marry. And I don't know what 13-year-old's praying that. But I didn't know at the time that God actually answered prayer, right? And so when, Kendall and I started to, get to know each other deeper, and there's a long story short, I got her this little stuffed animal after I'd been away on a trip, and I gave it to her, and she hugged me for the first time, and there was just this instant, like, I knew. And I can't describe the feeling, and I have never felt anything really similar to that, maybe on the day of our wedding, maybe. But I just knew that, like, this is the person. So kind of like what Jason's saying, when you have that, like, word from the Lord that like you know, it gives you like that hope. And so when we were finally considering getting engaged, there were a lot of different signs, and one of them being, I was on a mission trip with our old young adult pastor. If you guys remember him, his name is Hudson. Him and his wife looked at me and they heard our story, and they're like, "Why aren't you guys engaged? Like, what are you waiting for?" And so that was kind of the kickstart of things. We did get a sign of I had asked, I was like, God, if this is really the time, can I see these fish on the beach? Because we were, staying with our family at this hotel, and I kind of said that prayer kind of foolishly, but I was getting ready for bed, and my dog was kind of looking at the balcony, and I was like, "What are you looking at?" And sure enough, I go out, and there are all these fish just laying on the beach. And I just, I was like, okay, we're gonna go for it. And so I didn't have the money, didn't have the ring yet, and I just knew this is what God said, and I'm gonna go for it. And sure enough, everything just fell into place naturally, and we were married within the year. So
I just want to add as well, like Jason said, God works in so many ways, and so for a lot of us, it's not necessarily a word in the sky and written in the sky. And I know for me, I knew when I met him, something in me knew we were gonna end up getting married. But when we were starting to feel like we were getting ready, or we were being ready for that, I brought in people and asked, people who know my mental, emotional, and spiritual state, and brought them into that conversation. It was like, what do you think? Do you think I'm ready for this? Do you think we're ready for this? And so bringing in wisdom, and just the caveat, and I say that I'm in the prophetic community, I love the prophetic, but test the prophetic words that you get. Please test them.
Even if Lyle gives
Yes, especially if I give it to you at this point. But test the prophetic words, because sometimes we say, "Oh, God said this," and we all mishear God, and that's why we're in a community. That's why we need feedback. That's why we ask, are you sensing the same things? So bring in diverse opinions, and especially those who disagree with you. Bring those people in and entertain their thoughts, because maybe you're not ready. Maybe I was not ready. Maybe that wasn't really God speaking. Maybe he was speaking, but about a year later. So anyway, I'll pause here. I can talk about this a lot.
Well, actually, while you got the mic, I can ask another question. Since Lyle, you are originally from Lebanon, and Jason is a local 619 guy. Bring us into what was it like dating cross-culturally? You guys lived in Lebanon for a little bit too. We have a very, obviously, international community here as well. Reflections on that advice where you have people dating across cultures.
I'll hand over to you in a bit, but short answer is hard. It's very difficult dating cross-culturally, being married cross-culturally. There's so much about yourself that you learn. And things that you have are your normal, everyday normal, that when someone from another culture comes in, you're living together every day when you're married, you get confronted with these things. So it was definitely very difficult. We really had to shift our mindset from Lebanese culture versus American culture to kingdom culture. And be like, where is the kingdom culture in both of these cultures? There is so much gold in every single culture that reflects the image of God, the character of God. And there are areas of brokenness, even if we're used to them for decades and ages, there are areas of brokenness. And just being able to be real about that, to receive feedback from him when I'm doing something unreasonable, when something in my culture is unreasonable. So it's very difficult, and Jason will touch more on that in a bit, but I would just say, regardless of the difficulty, there is so much richness, because you are challenged in a way that you never would be when you are in your own bubble. And you are confronted with certain aspects of your character and your culture's brokenness and generational sin, generational habits that you might come across if you're dating someone in your own culture, but maybe not, or maybe way later in life. And so obviously we don't regret it, but know what you're getting into, that it is a lot more hard work, and it's a lot of hard communication and self-awareness and humility.
Yeah, I would just say there's more work involved in a cross-cultural situation, provided that both people are committed to actually working through your issues. If you're not, then it won't be that hard, because people will just start sweeping things under the rug, and then it'll come out later at some point. But if you're both committed, it's gonna be a lot more work, but you'll get a lot more reward out of it. It's really great for Americans to not be so American. And it's really great for Lebanese people to not be so Lebanese. Because, and if you marry, see, that's one thing that's really precious about marrying someone from another culture, and missions in general, and going overseas, is and not just going on like a two-week trip, that's not enough. You have to actually live somewhere. When you do that, you realize things about your own nation that you never could have known. And you realize things about the psyche of an American that you never would have known. And those type of things, that creates a truly global, the body of Christ is global, right? We're supposed to like receive from other nations in as many ways as possible. And so that's just an example of how you can grow. I will give you a fair warning though, it will be harder, and your first few years are going to be harder than someone if you marry from the same culture. So.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah. Very quick. Look for someone who has a learner's heart, a learner's attitude. I'm not saying that towards any culture. Like, I can speak about many Lebanese, many foreigners that I've met, that you see them interact in other cultures and you realize that they just cannot adapt, and that's fine. There are certain people who are not made to be in certain countries. But if you are going into a cross-cultural relationship, like, I know the first thing I looked at in Jason is his adaptability. Like, I met him in Lebanon, which was a plus that I got to witness that firsthand. But really seeing his adaptability, his willingness to learn, and now we're doing it the other way around. I'm here and I'm trying to learn, and so, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful thing. And I think there's a lot of lessons in that, like, regardless, like, even if you're from the same culture, obviously in the United States is huge. East Coast, West Coast, La Jolla, East County is different. Families of origin, and I love how you said that, American culture, Lebanese culture, kingdom culture. Like, as families, as couples, married couples, you are creating your own culture, and you want that to be with the kingdom culture, not necessarily your family of origins culture. And it's hard, but it's good, and we get to establish godly legacies. That's awesome. All right, gonna move us along here more to like the marriage side of things. So we had a question from the audience. We did a poll on Instagram, and this one came out. I thought it was really good. Is why does it feel like within the All People's Church community, and maybe church community at large, there's a pressure to get married in a very short amount of time? Anybody want to take that?
I'll start.
Is that okay? Or not?
Not okay. I think in our Christian world, we have idealized marriage, and we have come to see it as the destination. Like, this is the ultimate destination, when really it is just, like you're playing a video game. You're like level 10 of refinement. Like, how do I say this? There's a misconception, I think, in our world in general, but even just in Christian life, that your spouse will complete you, your spouse will heal you, your spouse will, if you're married, you won't feel lonely, you won't feel this, you won't feel that, fill in the blank. And the reality is you can get married and feel all these things.
That's right.
You can feel lonely, you can feel hurt by the person you love the most. And if you are not healed with God first in that, your spouse can never quench the need that you have, can never fulfill that need in you. And I just feel like in our churches, we don't talk enough about that. We just talk about how amazing marriage is, what it is. It is amazing. We love being married, but there's difficulties. And I think we idealize it, as I said, because we don't see it as the refinement process that it is. And we just see it as a destination of like, woohoo, everything's great. And so I'll just pause here. Let other people speak.
Anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, that's really good. It's not a destination. I think for those of us who get married, and we were pretty new Christians at the time, and we needed a lot of help. And so I came in with some hangups and some habits, that I carried with me into marriage. And so those created conflicts. And you mentioned culture. It's like we all have a certain culture that we're kind of used to. And I think if you come into a marriage and you think, like Leal said, everything's going to be great now that I'm married, and she's going to meet all my needs, or he's going to meet all my needs, it's not going to happen. There's only one person that can meet all your needs, and that's Jesus. He's the only one. And the other person is together, you get to enjoy that relationship with Jesus together, because everything that you do together is going to depend on him. And so, not one another taking over, but on Jesus in the center of that relationship between us. And he's carried us through difficult times. But one of the things that we really believe is we were committed to working things out no matter what. We didn't want to leave the room until we talked it out and tried to work it all out in our emotions and the things that we felt. And so be committed to talking and communicating through issues in your marriage. Because to me, that's the most important thing. You can't decide, oh, I'm not going to talk about this anymore and leave. And so one of the things that we experienced a long time, well, we've had our first couple kids, we had a conflict, and Teresa got mad and left the house, the condo we were in.
I was pregnant.
She had a lot of emotions.
Very hormonal.
But she had a right to be mad, and she left. But I went into the boys' room, and my oldest son was under the bed crying. And it broke my heart, because he said, "You guys gonna get divorced?" And I go, "No, I don't know where he heard divorce from, a friend or something," but I said, "No, buddy, we're not." And told Teresa, and she got back, and we just made a commitment. We're never doing that again. And we never did. So those things are important to work out. Anytime you have a conflict, the conflict builds intimacy if you work through it. If you don't work through it, it'll divide you, it'll cause resentment. So you have to work through those problems, and then you build that intimacy together. And what is intimacy? Into me you see. That's what I always say, it's intimacy. So
That's really good.
I think it just would help to acknowledge, like, it's rough out there. And like, I tell people all the time, I was like, I don't think I would have made it dating in this time, but I think the challenge that people face today is they're scared to wait. And they're scared to have that unknown of like, what if I don't meet that person? Or like, oh, I finally met someone, I gotta marry them as quick as I can. We had to wait for 8 years. We didn't like it, but there's nothing wrong with it, because God used that time to make us who we needed to be spouses. I was not the man that Kendall needed as a spouse when I was 13. I wasn't that man when I was 18, and I wasn't that man when I was, graduating college. It took that entire time, all the way up until I finally said, I do to her, that, oh, that was the whole process God had to take me through. He had to make sure that like I was solid and secure in my faith and love for Him, and it had to make sure that I got rid of some things and purged some things. And I was telling Kendall this weekend, I was like super sick, got the stomach flu, and part of the suck about stomach flu is like the only way to get over it is to get rid of what's inside you. And that's exactly what that waiting process was for us. It was like getting rid of all the junk that God was like, this doesn't belong here. And so I know it's difficult, but God is always faithful. And the reality is when you finally do meet that person or you finally do get married, you have the rest of your life. And when we were dating, I lacked that perspective of like, right now, this is so long, but the reality is now that we've made it, it's like that was actually really a short time. We have the rest of our lives to like enjoy each other, to work through, have that intimacy that we wanted the entire time we were dating. And you will get that time, and God is going to give you that, but you have to let it take you through the process first.
That's good. Just to move us along a little bit, thought that came to mind as you guys were sharing, like in dating, we talk a lot about boundaries. In marriage, from many married couples I know, there's a lot of good habits to implement. So I'd love to hear what are some habits you guys have, and conflict resolution. I mean, that sounds like it's a big part of it too, that you would just share for those who are maybe recently married, really thinking about getting married, so they can kind of start that path forward strong.
Our daily habit is we always have FaceTime no matter what. No matter what we're doing. On Saturdays, we have a tradition of walking to our donut shop, getting a donut, and then going home and doing FaceTime. I think that is one of the best habits you can build in your marriage and your relationship, just because that's who you're gonna go to first. Like, the Lord is gonna keep you two together. He brought you two together, and you have to like pay that respect almost. But yeah, and also just like another habit we have is we never go to bed angry. Kind of like what you guys were talking about. If it's 12 o'clock at night and we're still arguing, we will not go to bed. It's in scripture as well. But those are, I think, the top two habits we have.
And for those of you who might not know, FaceTime, that's what we just call spending time with Jesus. That's a new term for you. Not spending time FaceTiming your friends.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I still have to get used to that one. FaceTime with Jesus, what it is, face to face.
Regarding conflict, we process conflict slightly differently. We've noticed that sometimes when we work too hard at conflict, it just escalates or spirals. And so we have made it a habit to separate, still in the same house, but separate. And instead of, a counselor actually told us about this, which was like very transformative for us. Instead of thinking, what can this other person do for me and why they hurt me and how that made me feel, the reality is no one can make you feel a certain way. And owning that and then digging deeper, what is in my past that is coming up right now? Because the reality is there is something in the past that is coming up that is getting triggered, especially when you feel like your emotions went from 0 to 10. And so making it a habit to like not focus on it's this person, it's the problem, it's he's the problem, she's the problem, but like really what is sitting with the Lord, being like, Lord, what is this that you want to heal, and what is it that's coming up in me? And it releases the pressure off of the other person to be the one who meets that need for us. Because it's only, as we said earlier, it's only God who can do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of our language kind of, I think, the language that we use to describe our feelings can sometimes reinforce false beliefs about ourselves and another person. I think one of those that I hear almost all the time is that person made me feel this way. When you did that, you made me feel angry, or you made me feel disrespected. No, I mean, if we just look at what God says in His Word, we're not allowed to think like that, because He says that, we have the spirit of power, love, and sound mind. Like, I could list off all the scriptures for you. So when you do come to a conflict, the challenge is, what are you going to stand on? Your feelings or what God has said about you, and who you are in Him. And that's definitely not an easy process, but it's really important to eliminate that phrase from your the made me feel vernacular from your language, because it'll help you, first of all, not put pressure on another person. You say, you made me feel, the pressure's on that other person to fix you, when that's not their responsibility. So that's one thing. Second thing that I think has been really helpful for us is when we share something that someone else did that hurt us, like if I feel hurt or if I feel pain or something, instead of using an emotion that is a verb, use a noun. So what I mean by that is, you made me feel, or I felt disrespected. That's a verb. Disrespect is a verb, and there's an assumption there that you've already done something wrong, versus me saying, I feel pain right now. When you did this, I felt pain. There's no judgment there on her. I'm just letting her know this is what's going on inside me. But if I start using phrases, even if you go on Google and look at like all of the emotions list, some of them are not emotions. They're verbs that can cloak judgment, that I think people kind of unconsciously feel, but never really are able to identify in a conversation. So I would just, for example, we've started to say, hey, when you did this, I feel pain, or I feel sad, I feel angry, very basic emotions, not, I feel disrespected. Because that's like,
What does that mean?
what does that mean? And that means disrespect, like, I didn't disrespect myself. Obviously you disrespected me. So anyways, yeah, nouns, not verbs, that are emotions.
Language matters.
I was gonna say for Mark and I we've got the 40-year thing going on here, so words and habits. Just in a nutshell, all of these things, of course, quiet time with the Lord starts our day, serving together, habits, but everything that's already been said, but also owning your side of the street, your part in it. Also, we've done so many of the classes over the years, so we learned early on our love languages, practicing our love languages for each other, and we're both very, very different. Always being willing to grow. At our age, every day, just about every day, I will say, mostly this is my little saying, I'll say, I don't want a good marriage, Mark, I want a great marriage. So even though it's been 40 years, how can we always be growing to have a great marriage till the day we die? So I would say, so we don't ever give up, we don't get comfortable, we try not to get comfortable. Of course, we have our little routines and everything.
One of the things that was a game changer for me, and men might identify with this, but when I got married, my wife Teresa would come home and start talking about her day. And at the time she was working, so I forget where it was, a print shop or something. Anyway, I said, why don't you just quit? Just quit, just quit the job. You don't need that anyway, just quit. And then she'd get upset because I really wasn't listening to her, I just tried to fix her. And I read a book one time called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. But basically the guy suggested, just listen. I was like, that's weird, just listen. Don't offer any help or any answers. No, just listen. And that was a game changer for us. I would get, after a while, she would start talking and I'd listen. And I just love you so much. Thank you so much for thanking that. What did I do? I didn't do anything.
It's easier than it sounds sometimes. All right, last question, then I'll have a little final question for each panelist. since you got the mic, Marcus, and for you guys, how did having children change your marriage? And throw the grandchildren piece in there too. You know, like some of us right now are just thinking, oh, I just want to get married. But like, I think thinking fast forward to, oh, yes, children are a part of having having a family, and then even grandkids too, like that impacts our marriage. And like, it's so much more than just the giddy feelings at the altar, you know?
How did it change for you?
Well, it changed, we were talking about this recently too. Of course, it dramatically changed. But I think what was really sort of eye-opening is mothers. I mean, I raised 3 sons, and I always wonder why me. But but being the mother and loving them so much, allowing Mark to also into the equation to parent. Because there's this tendency where, I mean, I've seen it in myself, with friends, with relatives, of not really allowing the husband to parent like we know best. So I think that's kind of the only one thing I wanted to say about parenting, but it changed everything. I mean, Mark and I, more communication, more love languages, more understanding, and even pregnant Teresa that ran out of the house, and Taylor's under the bed crying because he thought we were getting divorced. So looking back at things like that, that's kind of a painful thing to remember. But anyway, it changed everything. It was a lot of chaos at times. We have a lot of stories where Mark almost died. We also lost our home and were homeless in when the San Francisco earthquake happened in '88. And 1 year later, on the anniversary, our second child was born. But we almost lost Mark 2 weeks before he got viral encephalitis. So we're having kids in the middle of, we have one story after another where God just took us through miracle after miracle after miracle. So
It builds faith.
it builds a lot of
Whether
faith,
you
yeah.
want everybody wants the testimony, but not the suffering that it comes with.
One of the things too that really changed us is being on the same page in raising boys. Because we've seen it in other families where the couple is not really with the same mind of discipline and where that has to happen. And we communicated quite a bit about what we think would be the best way to discipline and to be consistent with those things. So it forces you to kind of do some hard things. When you're a parent, you love your kid, you don't want your kids to experience any pain, but sometimes pain is good for them because that's how they can learn too. So it does change, and plus for me, I remember driving home from the hospital after our first son was born, and I just couldn't get over the fact that I was a father. I'm a dad, daddy, I'm a father, and then it made me reflect on God, my Father in heaven, and how He must feel towards us. It just that feeling of being a father, it just was overwhelming, and to know that that's how God feels about us. He loves us so much.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. All right, so last question. Each of you guys go down the line, answer is just what's one thing you want us all to take away from navigating love, sex, dating, marriage, be one of those in a healthy way? What's one piece of advice or just nugget or saying that you'd like to impart with us as we close?
You're only as sick as your secrets. So don't have any secrets. And don't bring it into dating, and don't bring it into your marriage.
I would say the biggest thing is not idolizing marriage. It's not your savior. You know, if there's anything, you know, I was guilty of this 100%. I'm like, when I get married, I'm gonna get to have sex, and that's gonna be amazing. And it's great. Sex is great. But it's not gonna satisfy you. Marriage is not gonna satisfy you. In fact, the problems that you think it's gonna solve, it's only gonna expose more of. Right. Because that's part of His purpose in marriage. And I just want to say to the singles here, you can be happy without being married. God wants you to prosper. He wants to fulfill you now, and not. He's not dangling a carrot in front of you that you're never going to be able to reach. I mean, just look at the Apostle Paul. He said, "I wish everybody was single." You know, and that's not very churchy, is it? To just say everyone should be single. That means this will step on toes. That means no one should have kids. He didn't want anyone to have kids. Uh-oh. All those mothers that have those kids, and you know, I'm not bashing on them. I'm just saying, like, don't let marriage become an idol. Don't let someone that you think is going to fulfill you. Instead, take the pain of it not happening and let it drive you to the Lord. Let it drive you to community. Let it drive you to mentors, and let God purify you and use it for that, and you'll grow.
I was just thinking about what you said earlier, Teresa, about fantasy and all of that. And I feel like that was part of the title, but we didn't really get to touch on it much, the sex part of marriage. And oftentimes we just put the guys up there, and we're like, you have porn addictions and all that, and like the women are good to go. But I feel like you just, like, for women, like, examine your hearts in the fantasies that you've seen, even in romance movies that you've seen, like, oh, this is how my husband needs to be, like the comparison. And like, release that pressure whenever you do get to that point. Like, release the pressure off of sex being this hot thing that, like, the movies tell us it is. Like, a lot of sex being good is about the emotional and spiritual intimacy that you have with your significant other. And you get to comfort them, they get to comfort you and be there for you. And it's like that connection that makes it or breaks it. Everything, all that we talked about today, conflict, communication, building a foundation, like, all of that is what sets you up for success in marriage and sex and all of that. And so, yeah, just like, I wish, for me, for example, I wish more people spoke about what women struggled with before marriage and during marriage than our churches do. And so, be real and, like, bring someone in on this, and there is no shame. Like, that's where Jesus wants to bring healing into our hearts.
Real fast. I just want to say, I have a buddy who went to a panel like this, and there was like a late 70s couple. They were talking about sex. They were asked, when is the best period of your marriage where you have the best sex of your life? And they're like, right now. Late 70s. So what does that tell you about emotional intimacy and physical beauty?
No.
Wow, thanks for that, Jason. I'm only 63. This guy's 72, thanks. So anyways, like, it's not enough. But, I'm joking. But what I wanted to say, I'll come back and be serious again. It was hilarious, isn't it? Buddy, I gotta have him over for dinner. So, I want to say that building that accountability, that team of people that we talked about earlier around you now. And what I love, this is really cool, we have great relationships with our sons, their wives, children, and all that. Very healthy. But what we love about our sons, we are leaving tomorrow morning to visit our kids in Maui. And then we have, our oldest is in Texas with his family, and then our youngest works with me, and we have a business together in San Diego. They all have seeked out over the years, wherever they were, spiritual parents. Don't you love that? I mean, they have great parents, but they have spiritual parents where they're at that help mentor, grow them through their marriage, through their lives, etc. We love that. So build your team of accountability now if you don't have it. Find those people that you trust, confidentiality, anonymity, all that, and let them help you grow in whatever season you're in, whatever path you're on right now. Sex, Jason.
It's true, by the way.
there's so many things, but I think what it comes down to is whether you're single, dating, married, you have to be seeking first the kingdom of God.
Right.
And that's what we built our marriage on. That's what we're going to keep doing until God takes us home. But if you see it that way, your marriage becomes like it's the amazing grace. We were asked, like, how would you describe your marriage? We're like, it's the amazing grace. We're trying to get to what God has for us at the end of the line, and we are disciplining ourselves, and we are doing things in a way that maybe don't entirely make sense, but it's what God wants, what we got to do. And when you live your life that way, you receive so much of His blessing, and you receive so much of His joy, and not all of it is just going to be easy. There's a lot of struggle that comes from trying to get married, to being married, to trying to just survive your first year of marriage. But what we get out of that is we get a picture of what, Adam and Eve had in the garden. It's that beautiful, it's you, it's your spouse, and it's God, and you're growing together, and there's no more shame, and there's no more, things that you have to hide anymore, because you finally can have that closeness. And so I would say, like, wherever you're at tonight, just know that if you seek first God's kingdom, He's going to take care of the rest.
Good. I think what's coming to mind for me is that this is a grace-filled journey. No matter where you're at, no matter what season you're in, you're going to make mistakes, and there's grace for that. I think we put too much pressure on ourselves, like we've said throughout tonight. But I think just give yourself grace for where you're at. Whether you're single, whether you're dating, you're married, I think whatever season you're in, you just need to give yourself grace for the mistakes that you have made and that you will make, because you will make them, sadly. But yeah.
That's so good. Let's give a big round of applause for our panelists tonight. Thank you so much. You guys can take a seat. I'm going to invite Sam back up now. And actually want to move into a time of response, actually. There's a lot said tonight, a lot of wisdom, and actually might invite our panelists to stick around, just kind of up here at the front. We're going to invite people, if you want to come up as Sam plays, and seek prayer. If you're feeling brokenness in your own life, then, or in this area of relationships, of sex, of dating, marriage, whatever it is, come on up. If you